Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Motion to take item E out of order.
Item B.
Item E. I'm sorry, item B.
Item B.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor to take item B out of order, and there's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, there's just a couple announcements in here. There's a Triad is presenting an elder law care planning and reverse mortgage seminar. So please join Triad on Tuesday, May 21st at 12:30 p.m. at the Senior Center for a presentation with attorney Paula M.P. Slozier from the law offices of Paula M.P. Slozier and David Tortolot from Homestead Mortgage. Paula will be discussing estate planning for older adults, and David will be discussing the pros and cons of the federally insured reverse mortgage program and how to use a reverse mortgage to age in place or to purchase a new home to downsize. Again, that's May 21st, Tuesday at 12:30 at the Senior Center. We're calling all Meals on Wheels drivers. The Council on Aging is currently looking for reliable volunteers who would like to give back by volunteering their time by delivering Meals on Wheels. Meals on Wheels program runs Monday through Friday, approximately 1.5 hours each day, usually 10 to 11:30 in the morning. You can deliver based on your availability, 2 times a month, 3 times a week, for example, or once a week, whatever would work for you. The volunteer will need to complete a volunteer application. We'll have a query check in the office, and it's this very simple process. Many drivers feel this is a very rewarding way of giving back. So any questions, please don't hesitate to contact the Council on Aging office at 508-697-0929. Final message is about the rabies clinic. The rabies clinic is this Saturday, May 11th, from 9 to 12 at the Highway Barn. Previous notices that are out there say May 18th. It is not May 18th. It's this Saturday, May 11th, from 9 to 12 at the Highway Barn. Those are my announcements. Item under B, under reorganization, I'll turn it over to the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wouldn't normally be doing this, but since the town clerk is away, she asked me if I would fill in for her, so I am doing that. So what I would like to do, let me explain for Mr. Rushton, who's a new member. I will take nominations from the floor for the office of president. When we get the nominations close, we'll vote the nominations and we'll vote a president. After that, the newly elected president will call for nominations for the vice president and go through the same process without me. After that, I will, I will pass out the cards that determine the seating. You'll see on your tables are stickers designating which table is which number. So is that everybody clear with that? So with that, I will take nominations from the floor for the office of president.
I'd like to nominate Dennis Gallagher for president of the town council.
Second.
Dennis Gallagher's been nominated and seconded. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I will ask the council clerk to take a roll call vote.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I don't have to move my seat. So I'll entertain nominations for vice president.
I'll nominate Sean George.
I'll second that. Sean George, vice president. Any other nominations for vice president? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Congratulations. Change seats.
I'll refer to the town manager for the chair shuffle here.
The chair shuffle, I will hand out cards, or you select cards, and then based upon the card that you get, you can rearrange yourself. And after I hand out the cards, if the president wants to call a few-minute recess so that people can move, that would certainly be in
GPS
order.
out, so you know where to go.
I'll choose for Aisha too, just in case.
All right.
He doesn't get a card.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yep, you're right. You can tell I don't usually do this.
Thank you.
Neither do I.
To the left desk.
Let me see, do I get a choice? Not this time.
Okay, we'll take a 2-minute recess while we get into our new seats.
1 year. What's that? Icky shuffle?
There's 1 year with only 2 people moved.
Well,
the first year, no one
come out
moved.
of Cincinnati.
I can't sit over there.
All right. I don't have to stay there. Kept 30
Turn
minutes.
away.
Through the pieces around.
Perfect. Either one of these three would be good, because I can still focus.
Super easy.
Good. Left out. Flawed process. Nothing good. What's that over there? That goes to you. Papers. I think that was Peter, he just left, he took everything out, he's got it over there. So you can, give that to her.
This?
I love my Mac. Or maybe I got it last time and you weren't here. That's probably it.
Yeah, I don't see anyone else has it.
Okay, we are now back in session. We have all got into our new seats. Get comfortable. Counselor Aisha Loesch is not with us tonight. She's out on business, so she will be with us next week. Going back to item A on the agenda, the approval of the minutes from the previous meetings.
President, if I
We
may.
did not do the moment of silence.
Yes,
Sorry
thank
about that. Yeah. We please have a moment of silence in recognition of all those and veterans who have passed. Thank you. Just a reminder to everybody that's here and in the audience that this meeting is being aired live, and we are all being recorded. And if we could all also always remember to have the microphone as close to us as comfortable so that we are recorded properly over the airwaves. I'll now move to item A on the agenda, the approval of the minutes from our previous meetings of April 9th.
Motion to approve?
Second.
The motion to approve, and there's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm abstaining if I wasn't here.
One abstention? Okay.
Oh, April
would
9th,
believe-
I'm sorry, I was. Never mind.
But I would believe there'd be at least one more abstention.
Entertain a motion to approve the minutes of April 23rd.
So moved.
2019.
Second.
Motion, there's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain from that vote.
We're abstaining from that one, okay?
Myself as well, Dennis.
Abstentions. Item C, proclamations. We have no proclamations this evening. Citizens' open forum. Are there any citizens here tonight that wish to speak in the open forum portion of our meeting? Any citizens at all? Just please come up to the podium, state your name and address, and we'll listen to what you have to say tonight.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Burr. I live at 45 Hartswood Way. I'm standing here today because I realize that the budget hearing is next week, and it's very easy for all of us to come and complain and to push and push and push, but I wanted to stand up here today and say thank you. I know that you've all been meeting tirelessly and really thinking outside the box, and I've seen some big thinking, some amazing work that's been done by all of you, and I know that that's not easy, and I know that the positive of this is that it has brought our community together. We've seen so many community representatives come and speak and bound together, but I haven't seen one person come up and say thank you for your hard work. So I wanted to come up today, and I realize that there's 1 week left to bridge the gap, and I know how hard you've worked and that you've made huge strides. So in the event I'm not here next week, because I travel for business, I want to take this opportunity as a citizen and as a mom to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens that wish to speak during the open forum session of our meeting? Anybody at all? Okay, we'll move on to item E, appointments. We have a town council appointment to the finance committee. We have one resume in the file, Ms. Leah Wyatt. I believe this is a vacancy. Is this replacing town manager?
Well, I can tell you momentarily, you have a vacancy, which was created actually by Mr. Rushton's departure, or you also have a vacancy, Mr. Marchetti had to step down. So you actually have two vacancies. Leah's would be filling one of those vacancies.
Motion to appoint?
Second.
There's a motion to appoint and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Gibbons, yeah.
we do have a now former school committee member who's expressed keen interest in this position. Is she going to be appointed? Otherwise, I'd use our second appointment to do that at our next meeting.
No, you have one, well, you have two vacancies, you have one applicant, so to speak, to fill it, so there's
I
still
will
another vacancy.
I would encourage her to become an applicant, but she has expressed keen interest. If we can arrange that for the next meeting, I'd like to see us fill it sooner rather than later, because we need to get quorums at these meetings. And these two ladies, as I understand it, are very interested in actually participating. Thank you.
Another lawyer.
Mr. Wood?
I will say that thanks to Leah's for stepping up. I think she saw one of the many posts about budget news and volunteering, and she's actually attended multiple meetings at this point, so has a pretty good ground understanding of our budget process, and as you can see by the resume, will be a huge addition to the vacancy left by Matt, or the other one, whichever name appears. So I highly recommend her appointment, and there's a couple other people that are also interested in other openings. So hopefully we can get quorum. That's been a really tough issue this budget season, which makes the discussion short. And they should be thorough discussions, deep discussions, lots of questions, discussions, and we've done all that, but it's been with a short staff. So. Looking forward to having all the seats filled. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Okay, this is just requires a roll call vote. Voice vote. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Unanimous. Thank you for applying and good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, the time being after 7:35, we're going to go to our item F, our hearings. As we know, the last meeting, we moved this hearing to today, so I'm just going to reopen and continue the public hearing on Order FY 19-052, the loan order for the upgrade of the wastewater treatment facility. At this time, I'll refer to the town manager on what this is about, and then we'll open it up for comment.
Mr. President, I mentioned this obviously in the prior meetings and hearings, but I'll recap for you. This is a loan order which will finance the rehabilitation work to the town's existing wastewater treatment facility, which needs an update pursuant to agreement with the EPA, town's agreement with the EPA and the Mass DEP, and an administrative consent order that was signed in 2018, which most of you are well aware of. We did fund some of the very initial work with reserve capital monies of $250,000 back in earlier this fiscal year. We are also making application to the state revolving fund for beneficial financing, very beneficial financing. In order to do that, we need an approved loan order. So that's why you're seeing this in front of you now. Actual work pursuant to this probably won't take place for at least another couple of years, but in order to get on the state revolving fund list, we do need the approved loan order. So I will also point out, since we have over time been putting money away in the sewer reserve fund, we will also be supplementing this borrowing with $1.5 million in order to finance the preliminary and final design of the plant. So that's it in a nutshell. I will tell you, folks at home don't see this, but it's a $32 million appropriation and loan authorization, so it's not insignificant. We have modeled the current wastewater fees that we charge in order to make sure that we're going to have the appropriate cash flow over the next 25 years in order to pay for this. So that is it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, I'll open the questions up to the public. General questions from the public. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak in favor of this loan order? Anyone from the public wishes to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak in opposition to this loan order? Anybody from the public that wishes to speak in opposition to this loan order? Seeing none, I'll entertain any questions from the councilors. Any questions from the councilors regarding this loan order?
I just have one, if I might. Is this just another case of us having to check a box on a state form to be able to say, yes, we've appropriated the money, here's the loan order, so now you can give us money from a revolving fund? Pretty
Yes.
much? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Is a
You want to
motion?
close the hearing?
I'm going to,
Uh-oh.
don't need, motion to close the hearing. The hearing's closed, and I'll entertain a motion to approve. You have a motion, there's a second. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Does not require requires a roll call vote. Council Clerk, right?
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Okay, now we're going to continue with the second hearing scheduled for 7:40. It's now 7:49. It was also continued, so we'll reopen Hearing for loan order FY19-053, water main replacement. I'll refer to the town manager to remind us of the explanation, give us another explanation on this loan order.
Mr. President, I will recuse myself from this discussion.
Okay? Mr. Wood has recused himself.
Mr. President, this loan order is pursuant to some additional work, significant additional work that we're doing on the water main replacement on Hayward and Wall Streets. We had originally begun the project looking at the road reconstruction schedule for next spring and looking at the condition of the water mains further down on Hayward. We decided to extend the pipe replacement in order to ensure that we would not be experiencing any water main breaks in the future. We have appropriated $1.2 million for this project earlier this fiscal year, and the additional $500,000, which is what the order calls for, is to expand the scope of the project and finish the entire length of Hayward.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the general public regarding this loan order? Any questions from the general public in favor? Anyone from the public wishes to speak in favor of this loan order? Seeing none, is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak in opposition to this loan order? Anybody that wishes to speak in opposition to this loan order? Seeing none, I will entertain any questions from the councilors. Any questions from the councilors regarding this loan order? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing and entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
There's a motion and there's a second to approve. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Seeing none, this does require a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Okay, motion passes. Mr. Wood has now rejoined the council. Moving on to item G, licensed transactions. We do not have any this evening. We do not have any presentations this evening. I will now refer to the town manager for his report.
Mr. President, I have a brief report this evening. I first of all want to welcome Katie DeRosiers, who has started in my office last week. She comes with a lot of experience. She's worked on Beacon Hill for, I believe, a state senator as well as a couple of state representatives, so she's got some good experience there. I also want to thank Susan McSheffrey, who filled the position temporarily while we were out searching, and certainly was a great fill-in during the time that we were without confidential assistant. Just a reminder to the council and folks listening at home, be prepared for BSU graduation on May 16th. Thursday, May 16th is one ceremony on the Boyden Quad, and then the biggest and bigger undergraduate commencements are on Saturday, May 18th, starting at 9 a.m. and again at 3 p.m. So that is the commencement schedule for BSU. The one on Thursday, May 16th, starts at 6:30. That's a much smaller one than the two on Saturday, the 18th. Just want to let the council know, or at least give you a heads up, that our finance director and I had the opportunity to meet with MSBA officials and the Bristol Plymouth Tech School about the potential new facility that they are looking at, or at least a thorough renovation of their existing facility. They are essentially in the same position we were in a little over a year ago, and Bristol Plymouth will be looking for MSBA participation in some solution to their building. I tell you this because as a member of BP, Bridgewater will be on the hook for some part of an capital assessment for that building. So as the plans get fleshed out further, we'll certainly keep you apprised of what that's going to look like financially. But they have a ways to go. Rabies clinic is scheduled for Saturday, May 11th at the Highway Barn. Please check our website for the appropriate times. I think dogs are in the morning and then cats are a little bit later in the afternoon, but check the website for the specific times on that. But that's the rabies clinic, Saturday, May 11th at the Highway Barn, 151 High Street. The traffic engineers, McMahon engineers, have been completing traffic counts around Central Square. They're looking at a number of different items, but most urgently, the signalization in Central Square, as you may know, is essentially some of the original signalization that was installed when the MBTA came through again, and so now it's in need of replacement, so they're reviewing the engineering aspects of that. They're also looking, as you know, to potential traffic patterns in the Central Square area and ways to create bicycle and pedestrian safety pieces in the Central Square area. So that will be coming to you at some point for a presentation, at the very least, I would say, within the next several months. So look forward to that. We are also in the process of reviewing the draft Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan. This, as you remember, was done with a little bit of grant funding from the state, and it's in order to identify our municipal strengths and weaknesses in addressing natural and man-made disasters, and including climate change, which is what's precipitated state funding of the MVP grant program. So once that is finalized, the MVP really will help inform some of the changes that we're going to make to the stormwater ordinance, which will be coming to you very shortly, if not the next meeting for first reading. It'll come at the first June meeting, and we will also see changes not only to stormwater ordinance, but likely it'll influence zoning and floodplain requirements as we move forward. That'll be a task for the zoning committee and the planning board as we move forward. The other benefit is that it makes us eligible for additional state grant funding to actually make capital improvements pursuant to the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan. It's on your agenda for first reading, I believe, this evening, and I just want to let you know that we have found a way to bridge some of the gap in the assessment from the Bridgewater Rainham School District and our current budget. We are presenting that as a supplemental budget. It'll go through a process. It doesn't require, there's no 45-day limit on that, so you're not under the gun to approve the supplemental piece. That will go through the process. But I just did want to let you know that we have found a way to get there that includes using additional new growth. I think most of the folks here know what new growth is. We were able to get our new growth established much sooner this year than we have in the past, so we're able to use that revenue in our current budget, so to speak, even though it's coming to you as a supplemental budget, in our current cycle, I guess I should say. And so that's quite useful in that regard. But I will throw out a little bit of a warning from the finance director and from me that there are, this doesn't solve the structural challenges that we faced trying to meet the school's assessment year after year. And my hope is that we can use some of the summer to really sit down and have some very honest discussions about where we need to go in terms of where the school needs to go in terms of education, and where we need to be in terms of our revenues and expenditures and how we can meet future school assessments. So that is in the works, but I'm happy that we were able to come very, very close to bridging the entire gap, and we'll I won't say we'll leave the work for later, but we know that we've got work to do when the summer starts, and we'll get on that right away. I want to advertise the June 5th Comprehensive Master Plan Public Session. That's a Saturday at the Senior Center, Wally Kruger Way. We're going to have another public session, so you'll see a lot of advertising around town for that. The first public session had a decent turnout, but we're really looking forward to capturing a lot more people in there who can let us know what they want to see in the town in the future, because that's ultimately what a comprehensive master plan is.
What was that date?
June 5th,
No, it's
Saturday, June 5th, probably around 9 o'clock.
June 5th is a Wednesday.
Okay, let me check then. You are correct. It is, okay, so I take it back. It's Wednesday evening, tentatively starting at 4:30, but I'll have obviously much better date and time for you next meeting. But it is June 5th. I talked to the president yesterday a little bit about the World War I memorial. We're going to reschedule or schedule a meeting with the committee in order to try to establish a consensus on how we want to move forward with that. So we'll probably be looking at that end of May, towards the end of May, very beginning of June timeframe. Just because I know people have been asking you, and people ask us as well, I did want to let you know that Jennifer Burke, our Community and Economic Development Director, and I met with Mr. Pascal, the owner of several properties on Broad Street, and his consultant. He has let us know that he anticipates submitting to the planning board within the month. So he was waiting on site plan design, drainage calculations, and detailed building designs in order to finalize an agreement and get in front of the planning board with his application. So that is, according to him, that is his schedule. And last thing I have, we alluded to some finance committee openings. I have, as of now, I have filled my 3 openings. The town clerk may have an opening, but she has currently filled hers, and the town council, after your appointment this evening, has one vacancy to fill. So that Councilor Fitzgibbon's suggestion, I will reach out to a potential applicant and see if she has an interest and forward that on to the council for your consideration. And that is what I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the town manager from the councilors? Mr. Souza.
Yes. Not really on what you covered this evening, but it's something we talked about before. How long has the bus been parked at the senior center?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Bus, how long has it been parked at the senior center?
The bus?
Yes.
The old one or the new one?
New one.
The new one, we took ownership of the new one, I want to say a month ago or so.
3 months?
Or 3 months. Could have been 3 months.
3 months. Why I bring it up is we had a meeting in your office, and I brought to the attention that it wasn't posted for the job position, and it was put right in that day, but there was a mistake in it, and the mistake was fixed, but there's still a mistake, and that's why I don't think anybody's applying. I have a copy of it, and it says the driver will cover evenings and holidays, plus the normal times that it does, and they don't do evenings and holidays. So, can we see that that gets corrected
I'll take a look at that.
properly, please?
Yep.
Thank you. One more thing, if you may. The center has been trying to put in a pickleball court, okay? They haven't been told that they can't do anything because the road coming out of the back of the school, they're not really sure where it's going, and because of that, they can't put their pickleball anywhere. The seniors are starting to think, they're not starting to think, they think this right along, that we forget about them. And I dropped in on their meeting yesterday, and one of the long-term members blamed us the elected officials for the lack of interest and participation at the center and cause for all these delays and, as she plainly put it, messes. So I really don't think we should be putting this off for another year and a half or two because we haven't decided. If we know where the school is going to be, whether it be a complete new school, which has been presented, then why not the driveway established at the same time? And let's get this taken care of and hopefully get this resolved and work with our senior citizens, I understand, is only a small percentage, like 14% of our town population. And they feel that when you're 14%, people should hear you. And I told them, get out and vote. Thank you.
Mr. Wood.
It's funny, because I was going to raise pickleball courts, too. I heard from a different source, probably different than yours. The person I talked to feels that there is space in the corner of the parking lot where they wanted to go, regardless of the road going in. And given the timetables that the school could take, it could take a couple of years anyway. Pickleball courts are pretty simple to construct and could be useful right away. I know there's some capital decisions around that, but I think they would be very popular and would be used by the senior center extensively. So I too encourage action to be taken as soon as quick as possible.
If I may, what I understand is they're not taking any tax dollars for this thing. They have their own fund. They have raised money. They've had grant money, okay? So they're not asking for the taxpayers to come in and pay for this, by what I understand.
If I could, I'll just clarify that the issue with a pickleball isn't whether or not you or I want the pickle. I think we all want pickleball courts. I think they're going to be a great addition to the center in particular, and they're a great recreational activity. The question isn't whether we want them or not. The question is making sure that if and when we do this, we do it right. The overall property that the senior center, the Conan Center, and the Mitchell School sit on is all town-owned, but it's on two different lots. The Conan Center and the senior center are on one lot. The school is on another lot. The school lot is actually inclusive of that big gravel parking lot that is next to the senior center that we all use when we go down to the senior center. So essentially, we have to make sure that if we place the pickleball courts on what is, I'll call it the school property, that those aren't going to have to get removed for some reason as part of the new school project. So there's the architects and the OPM of the Mitchell School project are well aware of the pickleball courts. They're well aware that we're trying to situate them. They've given us their commitment that they'll try to fit that in, whether it's on the school property or on the town side. So I don't want to promise that we'll get it done in a time frame that we can't live up to because there are too many moving parts in terms of trying to place them. But I think ultimately, I hear the people at the center. I get the same calls. But when we do it, we want to make sure we do it right out of the gate so that we're not having to backtrack and do anything, rip something up that we've just put down. Funding for them, the bulk of the funding has come through your capital plan, and I believe there are some other sources of funding that they're looking for, grant funding. I think they've collected up a little bit of money down at the senior center to contribute towards that effort. So it's not certainly not that we don't want that. That will be a great addition in that location specifically. We just have to make sure we fit it in appropriately so that we don't pull the trigger too soon and do something that we're going to have to, alter or dig up or replace later on. So,
Thank you. Any other questions to the town manager, Mr. George?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the town manager. Can we get a status on the letter to the school committee about revisiting the regional agreement?
Yes, I met with Rainham Selectman Pat Riley earlier this week. No, it must have been the end of last week. And we had a discussion, we're going to finalize that discussion specific to a request, a joint request to the school district. She was unaware that, at the time, she was unaware that the school district actually is the one that needs to create that. And I think we're on the same page in terms of, setting up some kind of committee in conjunction with the district that may include counselor, may include Rainham selectmen and so forth. So we're working on that. Ball's in my court. I'm going to respond to her with some ideas shortly, but
have we communicated to the school committee directly? Because we can have the conversation with Rainham, but my understanding is the school committee is the one that has to initiate it.
Correct.
Are they aware through a letter that we're going to request that?
I haven't let them know that we're going to request it. I was going to let the letter serve as a request. I mean, I certainly can email or text and let them know it's coming.
I think it would be a good idea to give them a heads up that we're asking that, because from a technical perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, the school committee feels that it doesn't need to be revisited, it doesn't matter what we ask.
Correct.
So I think before you put in a lot of effort, let's make sure the school committee's on board, since they're the driving force behind it. I think that would make a lot of sense. In regards to Mr. Pascal, I know he hasn't submitted his plans to the planning board. Did he give you any indication that he's made any significant changes from what he presented here?
He has made some design changes, which I think came at the our recommendation. But we haven't seen, his final plan, so we're a little bit in the dark on what we talked extensively about what we'd like to see there, what we wouldn't like to see there, and
Right.
he's listened to that. In fairness,
did.
he's listened to that.
Okay, so he's not going to forget everything that we had talked about in that presentation, and I think we were, in my opinion, very straightforward in a lot of the concerns we had with the parking, with the traffic, and I would like for us to get some sort of indication before he goes to the planning board that he has some sort of plan for that, instead of him going to the planning board and then getting the feedback that these are the things we expected that he hasn't presented on. I think you kind of have to be very direct in that respect. That's just my opinion. But I just put that out there.
I do agree with you, and our the process that with under the new ordinance, zoning ordinance, is essentially he has to go through us, and this is our new practice anyway, regardless. But he has to go through us to come up with a development agreement that we are okay with, and only then can it get to the planning board. So he has to, by the time he gets to the planning board will know, and you will know that that what he has proposed is something that at least operationally we can live with and that we're happy with.
Right. I think there's a perception out there in the public that for whatever reason, we're the ones that are getting in the way of it moving forward, which is not the case. Obviously the owner has to go through the process, and it's at his determination on what that is. But I think there's a lot of people out there that honestly think that something came in front of us a year ago, nothing has changed downtown, and now all the blame's coming on to us, which is not the case.
Yep.
So I think, to encourage him along, I think would be beneficial, but also conveying to him again that we do have some things that we asked for collectively that should be included in that proposal. I actually have a question for Mr. Rollins. So in your operational update, there was an item there about concerns of things that are included in the operational update and versus open, what's it?
Open meeting law.
Open meeting law, which I'll be 100% honest, I still struggle with on a daily basis. So could you just give us a little bit more insight?
Sure.
And the reason I'm asking too is it's great to get that, because don't take this the wrong way, Mr. Dutton, but if you go through your operational update, we'll be getting out of here at 11:30 every night. But I think it's also something that is going to be beneficial, but I'd also hate to see it, forgive the term, get watered down in regards to what's on there. So if you could just give us a little bit of an overview, that'd be great.
Yeah, so my concern, and I've expressed this to the town manager on a few occasions, is that during the town manager's report portion, he has not identified the areas or the topics that would be discussed during that portion, which I think we should, okay? I think it doesn't have to go into great detail like under the hearing where it's pretty explicit about what is before you all. But I think there should be some bullet points about what is to be discussed and the parameters of what is to be discussed. And that will guide you all as well in terms of your questions coming back, because I think what is happening is the town manager's report is kind of becoming an open forum, and I don't think that's appropriate under the open meeting law. I think citizens should have the right to know what the town manager is going to discuss and what you all are going to question him on at the town meeting, so they can determine if they want to be here and hear that in person or not. So my recommendation was that he bullet point what he would like to talk about, but also that he communicate with you all about what you may want to talk about during that period as well, and that be bullet pointed. Okay, so there has to be some identification about what the town manager's report is. Okay, if it was simply a running, these are the things that I say at every meeting, then I wouldn't worry so much about it. But I think what is happening is he's coming with what he has on his agenda to talk about, and sometimes we stay within those parameters and sometimes we don't. Certainly you all have the opportunity to talk on subjects at other times in the meeting, which I think is totally appropriate, like when you're signing off, or there are other opportunities to talk about the things you all feel are important. But I want to be careful about something that's designated in the agenda specifically like that, staying within proper notice. That's all.
You all through. Anything else?
No.
Do you have anything else? Okay, Mr. Fitzgibbon.
I just want to follow up on Mr. George's question. Essentially, I've looked at town manager's report as, if you remember back in the day on C-SPAN, I don't even know if they still do it, they'd have Prime Minister question time. So it was always the report of the Prime Minister was, I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, I will have further meetings with them today, and that's it. And then, then every member of Parliament can get up and ask them whatever question they want. But I understand your concern.
That's my concern.
And I think that just becomes then the president's job in working with the town manager
right.
the week before to identify, okay, what are the items on the agenda, just like we do with everything else, and
sure.
just say, okay, we've got Mr. Sousa's concern, we've got Mr. Chase's concern, and everybody's going to be heard. So I get it, but it's just different than what we've done.
And I can respect that, and I can completely understand that. But I think what has happened to some degree is that there have been full conversations that have not been noticed. And I think that is an issue open meeting wise, and we just have to address it, and no big deal, we will address it. But I think that it also encourages the council to communicate in advance with the town manager about these things that we're going to talk about, and maybe will lend to a more productive conversation. While I understand you all are volunteers, certainly, and you only have limited time to put together what you want to talk about, I just think this is an important thing. It will help the meetings run more efficiently, and it'll also keep us in line with what I think the law is.
I'm going to Mr. Columbotus.
So practically speaking, I think you're absolutely right that town manager's report has served as kind of an open forum to address whatever concerns are on our minds. So practically speaking, how can we address those concerns? Should we, before the agenda's due on Wednesday, ask the town manager, add this bullet point?
Yes. I think, and sorry, town manager, but I think that you all should ask specifically the things that you would like to see addressed be put into his report, because then he can look into what it is you want him to look into and address them in the fashion that he can. Obviously, there's a limit to what can be on a town manager's report just in terms of the time frame that we have. We can only go to a certain hour. So, maybe you save things for certain meetings or not. But I think that's what should be happening. One, it's important to do legally, but I also think it just lends for a more efficient meeting. And I think that it'll give the town manager also an opportunity to maybe answer your questions instead of sometimes on the fly, maybe with a response that he's looked into
Prepared,
a little
yeah.
bit more. So I just think it's good practice. It's
Right.
best practices.
Right. So to that end, through you, Mr. Dutton, it might make sense, ideally, we would get your operational report on a Tuesday, so we can read it Tuesday night.
A Monday?
Right, and by Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, when our agenda items are due, submit. So I realize that won't always work.
It's
but-
very tough reading it on the train. Okay,
On your
I'll-
phone?
Yeah, and today was a prime example.
And I get that this is a big change. I just want to make sure that we do things that, you know, are in compliance with the law and efficient. I mean, you all want to run an efficient meeting too, I'm sure.
Mr. Wood?
Yeah, I too would like to run an efficient meeting, but I'm going to disagree with you on this one.
Sure,
Not that you and I haven't disagreed before.
many times.
I like the transparency of the conversation, and at no point in the history of this council has a vote ever been taken during the town manager's report, which is what open meeting law addresses.
It does.
Right, so the fact that I heard Mr. Chase talk about pickleball courts and I heard someone else talk about something else, I don't hear during a phone conversation between that person and the town manager, which is a viable form of communication that would happen outside of this chamber. So I tend to think that although it's sometimes a full-on conversation, it does not lead to a vote during that agenda item, and that's what open meeting law applies to.
Maybe not during that moment does it lead to a vote, but I'm gonna guess, and I'm not, my brain's not a Rolodex, but I'm gonna guess that during that conversation, discussions that inevitably led to a vote were discussed, right? And they were contemplated, and then a vote was made on them. So
But the debate
there's a
never
caveat there.
But the debate never happened between counselors, right?
Well, maybe it did, maybe it did. I don't know. A lot of that is indirect conversations.
But you also have to agree we were in a posted open meeting when that discussion happened.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we're not going to rewrite history here.
Right.
What I'm saying is the best practice, and you all can work with the town manager to adopt whatever you want, right? You're the boss. I'm just giving you my legal advice. So the best practice in this context is to have agenda items there that are open for discussion so that they're properly noticed and posted. What you all decide to do, if the council president and you all have decided, hey, we're not going to go down that road, and you've talked to the town manager about it, and that's fine. I can just give you my advice, and that's my advice, because I think it's the best practice.
Mr. Columbotus?
Through you, Mr. President. So, Mr. Rollins, you would assert that even deliberations without a vote, deliberations in themselves, demand notice.
Well, because I think the deliberations in some contexts that we've addressed end in a vote, right? So Mr. Wood is not inaccurate in his analysis of it not ending in a vote right then and there, but it's certainly a deliberation amongst a quorum of you in some fact. Whether or not someone's debating with you or not doesn't necessarily mean it's not a deliberation that may inevitably lead to a vote. So
Right.
that's what I'm trying to avoid. And yeah, there are some very nuanced distinctions in there in what I'm saying, which is why I'm telling you it's a best practice thing. I'm not saying to you all that this is a big issue or anything like that. I'm saying it would be better if we were operating it this way, and it would be more efficient.
So, in your understanding of the open meeting law, it stipulates that that the public has a right to be notified of even deliberations.
Yeah,
Right.
The public does. If you have a quorum that's deliberating about a matter that's going to be voted on, the public has a right to be notified of that.
Right. Thanks.
So is it more that we need to let the town manager know, or at least we need to put it on the agenda, what we want to ask him, but what's in his report doesn't need to be on the agenda?
No, both.
Both?
Both. I actually think, because he could be bringing up topics that could be topics that will become deliberation, right? Some stuff that he talks about in his town manager's report certainly becomes part of deliberation and inevitably a vote, right? He may give you an update.
Like this, like this, we're deliberating.
Happens all the time, right? So these are the kind of things that I would like to see. We just have a protocol that this is just how we do it. And I get the resistance. I totally understand. I knew I would face some, but I think it's just better practice.
I agree that we shouldn't have deep discussion and really come to a conclusion on items that are not on the agenda. But I know many public agencies that do put on their agenda, other items that the chairman or president wants to discuss. There's always that caveat, other items. So my understanding too is that you don't need to list verbatim every single bullet point that you're going to talk about that night.
You
You
don't
have to have a general, the public needs to know in general what you're going to be talking about tonight, but other items can come up. But I kind of agree with Councilor Wood on this, that we can bring things up, but the deliberation and coming to a conclusion, if what the town manager reports to us or discussion that we have might lead to an ordinance or resolution that, well, obviously we can't do anything that night. It comes back to us, goes to a committee, we have more discussion, and then we take a vote. So, I'll work with you and the
Yeah.
manager on that. 'Cause
My only caveat or disagreement with what you're saying is that if it's a matter that inevitably will be voted on by you all, and it's discussed amongst you all, or even one of you, in a forum where there is a quorum, that is a deliberation in a public setting with a quorum of you present about the ultimate decision. So if you want to just list the things that are ultimately going to come up, I suppose you could try to do it that way, right? Where you try to figure that out and maybe parse out the things that are never going to be voted on and are just simple conversation points. I was saying just take a blanket perspective, but yeah, I mean, you certainly, whatever is your pleasure. This was just something that I have seen, and I want to make sure that we just make sure we're careful about it. That's all.
Any other questions for the town manager?
Just one last question. Mr. Rollins, how would you characterize us simply asking for information? Is that different, as opposed to us offering our positions? Suppose we'd ask about status update about a particular project. Would that?
I still think it's a deliberation, because I think the reason you're asking is in contemplation of what you're ultimately going to vote on the major issue or question, right? So that's all deliberation. The context of that is all deliberation, and it's all fact gathering in anticipation of your ultimate vote. So that's my perspective on it.
So, further down the agenda, we have committee reports. I mean, should we have bullet points under the committee reports as to what each committee is going to report on that?
Probably
night?
should.
All right.
Yeah, you probably should. Yeah.
We'll talk about these things.
Yeah. I understand. I get the pushback, and I get that there may be something in between what I'm saying and what goes into practice. I'm just giving you all my thoughts on it.
Right, no.
Frankly.
I'm just going to add, since we have the forum. I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I think it applies more to active legislation than potential legislation that no one has actually drafted and put in front of the board. But we can, the Western Division of the AG's office is really good at responding back to open meeting law questions, so I'm sure we can find out.
I'm sure we could.
Any other questions for the town manager, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Off this topic, and it's really not for the town. It's really not for the town manager, but to address something that Mr. George asked about earlier, communicating with the school committee. I do notice that the superintendent is here. Thank you for coming, Mr. Swenson. Certainly appreciated whenever you arrive. But he could certainly bring that back quicker to the school committee than the town manager could write a letter. So if you just let him know that the two towns have been talking about a regional agreement amendment, that would be great, but continue with the letter.
I would, and to expand on that, I do not think that the school committee is not aware that we're looking to renegotiate it. What I'm trying to do is follow the protocol so that we have everyone notified, we're on a timeline, because if we're doing all this, going back and forth, there should be an expectation if the school committee in fact is going to do this. So I guess that's it's not a secret.
Yes,
Let's do it the way that we're told we need to do it.
fair enough.
I would just say that last week in our reorg for the. I think we might be, I think we might be going beyond this, the point of order. I don't think this is the proper forum for this. Obviously, you all may have questions, but now this would really be beyond notice. So there should be no questions or conversation between you all and the school superintendent in this meeting.
Is he allowed just to talk to us and then we tell him to go away?
He can wait till after the meeting and grab you if he wants to talk to you.
Sorry, Mr. Swenson, but
That's
you're gonna
okay.
Sorry.
I didn't get my steps in.
Okay.
Any other questions for the town manager? Moving on.
Can I just say, at the risk of extending this conversation beyond
I just
what's
asked one
interesting,
simple question here. Okay?
Sorry.
I think all the counselors know, and I'll repeat it, I am always happy, if you want to call me or text me, I'm always happy to answer a question, if it's a question that you need an answer to outside of a meeting session, certainly. And that doesn't violate any open meeting law.
Yeah, and I think, I apologize, that what Mr. Rollins is trying to do is get ahead of it.
Yeah, that's all.
I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're sitting there saying we've done it wrong in the past?
No.
Trying to get ahead of it.
Nope.
Which I appreciate, not to say that we all agree with it, but.
No, which is fine.
It's a good try, you know,
No,
herding
thank you.
cats, but. that's
Swing and a
okay.
miss.
Moving on to item J, discussions. We actually have an agenda item. on this
We do.
And I'll
We
refer
do.
to Counselor Wood.
What we don't have is a slideshow, because my paying job got in front of my free job, and I didn't have time to put one together. The folder that you have, that everyone received a copy of, thank you, Ann, for putting that together, contains some information. I could have sent you a link, but this is for you to hold on to for a while. That's why it's in a folder, so it can sit on a shelf, gather dust. So there were a lot of questions about our most recent attempt to revise the charter. So this folder contains some information about items about our relative to what may be the next effort, right? So there's a number of ways to go about changing the charter, and the town council on its own cannot change the charter. Although we do have a question right now that Jason may look into, because I'm not sure, there's a lot of material beyond this to read. Whether or not the town council can make a recommendation to change, it goes to the AG office to make sure it doesn't conflict with state law and then come back to the voters. That may be a path. I'm not certain that's a path. But for things like capitalizing T's and turning ones into the word one, that might be a simple path if it exists. Beyond that, everything really ties into a town-wide vote at these town election time. All right. So I think there's three primary ways to go about changing a charter. If you look at Mass General Law, Section 43B, Section 10, it tells you how to change a charter, but in a conversation with Jason, that may only apply to municipalities that actually use 43B to create their charter. And that path is through a charter commission, and Bridgewater didn't use the charter commission model. The charter commission model is where the town actually elects a group of 5 to 9 commissioners. They go through and make a recommendation, and then if it doesn't have changes that relate to the legislative body, that can go to a vote of the town. I think maybe the AG's office needs to check that too, but that can go directly to the town. So that leaves the state out of the picture. The other method, which a lot of municipalities use, is to use a special act, and that's what the town of Bridgewater used originally. So we originally had the government study committee put together a recommended charter, and that became a special act of 2010, whatever it was. Sounds right. No, I'm confusing with the other special act I was thinking of. But so special act of 2010. So half of what the state does is special acts. The town actually did a special act a couple of years ago related to police officers who were retired doing details. And so in that case, the request was made to the state. It became a special act. It was run through the committees and everything else, and then it was simply voted on by the state, and it became law for the town of Bridgewater. So it didn't have to go to a town-wide vote. In this case, for amendment charters, though, or revisions, and there seems to be a difference in the language, whether it's an amendment or a revision. If we go through the state did like it did here in this particular instance. We sent a revised charter to the state. The state created a special act. The special act, through committee process, they added a section 9 or 10 and created the language that became our one question word, our one question vote. And in some cases, and I don't know of any, but in some cases, the state could have simply accepted and voted on the amendments, and that would have been the end of it. And in some cases, the state can simply, the general court is the House and Senate. The general courts, in some cases, can create a charter for municipality. But I think by default, and if I were at the state level, I would say, no, let's kick it back to the town and have them vote on it so the local voters get a voice in the process. So in that case, and in the next case, if we want to have multiple questions appear, it really needs to be formatted going up to the state as multiple questions. So if you recall the original charter had two main questions. It was two complete charters in one body, and the question came back. It was really three choices: do nothing, select the form that we have now, or select a town manager, selectman form of government. And the town chose this council, town manager form of government. So in that case, I think the body of the chart going up to the state actually had multiple questions already built into it. Our challenge here is that in the case of where we would affect like term limits, if we wanted to do that again, that's where it does have to come back to a full vote, regardless of what the state does. I think that has to come back to a local vote anyway, if I read it correctly.
As a special act?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well,
No, I think that the state legislature can approve it.
right, they can. So what's in your folder is some material I found. So the charter the charter itself, our charter, has section 9.4, which I think it's in here. If it's not, it's in your briefcases, because everybody, like me, carries the charter around with them every single meeting. 9.4 describes how to change the charter, and it mentions Article 89 of the amendment to the Constitution. And so this is the first item is exactly that. The sections that apply really are Section 3, which includes a commission, and Section 4, which is changing charter, amending a charter by a city or town. And then there's Section 8, I think it's a special act section, the powers of the general court. So there's a number of different choices there. Then I found the second document you have starts out with the home rule charter adoption or revision. And there's, again, 43B, Mass General Law, talks about commission. This talks about commission and process. On page 5, though, it's interesting. It switched over to amendments proposed by a town meeting or council. And although it doesn't mention the Attorney General's process, as long as the second paragraph there says the amendments may not relate to the composition, mode of election, of appointment, or terms of office of the legislative body, mayor or city manager. Beyond that, you can make changes, and then the changes can, if you make those, they have to go through the charter adoption or revision process. Otherwise, we need to talk about the process for doing what that paragraph is actually talking about. And this isn't the only discussion I hope we have. I hope we have more to settle on the process of how we're actually going to revise other sections. For example, changing the finance committee structure, if we want to do that, we should have a process, talk through a process for doing that. And that is in the legislative body, so that doesn't necessarily have to follow the revision. It could be an amendment. And there's a lot of other material out there. If you look at like the town of Westwood, they have a lot of charter revisions. They've had a charter for a long time. and they make some minor changes, they make some large changes. So it'd be good if someone reaches out to that town or other towns that have done revisions and amendments and find out about the process and nail it down. Of course, our town attorney can help out with his thoughts on the process too. The last section, the last 2 pages are really from other related material. Home rule is a general topic. So it isn't just about charters, it's about taking hold of doing, as we've done, your bylaws and your now we have a administrative code and some other things that we do on a given Tuesday night that do not need review by the Attorney General's office, that do not need the state to become involved, that we have the power as part of the home rule to affect changes to ordinances and things like that. So hopefully you'll find this information, and it's a discussion, not just a lecture. So I would like to open it up to any other discussion.
Anybody have any thoughts? And we're going to have to put together a committee or discuss that in January as far as the next review.
Well, that's a good question. So a lot of people asked, are we starting out from ground zero? I don't believe we are. So the review committee that was formed in 2014 made recommendations. And we can go through and figure out which ones we want to pursue further and the process for doing that. But you're right, the charter does say that once every 6 years there will be a review committee formed. But it's not necessary to wait until 2020, 21, 22 to start taking action if there's things like the Finance Committee or Ts and ones and things like that we want to try to get on next year's.
But if the changes that were proposed, which failed, can they come back before that 2-year?
It's a 1 year.
1 year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
1 year, right.
So it's 1 year. It's 1 year of this body making the recommendation, not of the Charter Review Committee making the recommendation. So we made the recommendation in November of 17, I think.
And that's under 40, you're talking under 43B anyway, and if you do it by special act, it's a little bit different.
Special act is completely
So
different.
timing
Right.
isn't an issue
Right.
with this now, okay. Anyone else? Okay, moving on to committee reports. Seeing none?
Yeah, it's not on the agenda as a line item, but I will tell you that the Budget and Finance Committee has met many times now and had detailed walkthroughs of the four enterprise funds as well as the general budget item. Mr. Rushton was there first as a participant on the Finance Committee and then just sitting in, because he was either elected or going to be elected, but participating in that. Unfortunately, Mr. Haley is gone now. He's part of the committee. You've heard some of the insights about what's going to happen. There's an item on the agenda later about the supplementary proposal. The town finance director has been at all the meetings and explained. We walked through the revenue process first. And the process you heard about tonight about the additional $200,000 in new growth is based on procedure in the assessor's office, procedure that was completed early this year rather than midsummer, and that really benefits our process here. So gives us more confidence in the numbers. And as you're aware, because of a slip up in the advertising, we have a special meeting next week to go through and approve the budget. Thank you.
Any other committee reports? Seeing none, I'll move on to item L, legislation for action. We have order FY19-004, evening office hours of the town clerk. I'll refer to the town manager and town attorney on this order.
Mr. President, as the sponsor, I'd like to make a motion to kick it back to committee.
Second.
To what committee would that go to?
Rules and procedures.
there's a motion on the floor to send it to Rules and Procedures, and there's a second. Is there any discussion on referring it back to?
I'd just like to hear why.
I think that, I think that the original intent was for the clerk, and then we expanded it to the whole town, but we're not at a position yet where we have a strategy around how to do that. So I'd like to put it back into committee where we had some detailed conversations about the process and allow the town manager to work out a strategy around actually how to do this. Mr. George was right. I've done a lot of research, and there's many municipalities that have full weeks and full weeks with evening hours. And I've gotten an earful lately from various people that said that, you know, closing Fridays or whatever the strategy is not a good idea. So I think it's better off to go back to committee, let some more work get done there, see what the strategy works out to be. And if it takes another couple months, there's no harm to doing that.
This has been floating around since September 2007.
Tell me about it.
And
17, but yeah.
2017, right, sorry. So
Speed of government.
it's like, I just hope that, things can move along. I mean, I see the order, I see the date, 2017. I see all kinds of line, there's only one sentence that's not lined through here. So I hope we can get, if it can't work, it can't work. But I don't think we should, if it's not going to work, we shouldn't try to force it to make it work, that's all. So there's a motion and a second to send it to Rules and Procedures. Any other discussion? Does that require a roll call vote? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So that's going to committee. Now we have Order FY 19-055, acceptance of a gift, Howard Foundation.
Motion to approve?
Second.
There's a motion on the floor to approve and a second. Any discussion?
I'd just like to, if I may, I'd like to thank the Howard Foundation for their gift. This is the second time they've made this gift, and we're in complete support on it with the Budget and Finance Committee, and Finance Committee voted to approve as well.
This does require a roll call vote.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Order passes. We move on to old business. Item M, ordinance FY 19-006, general ordinance, acceptance of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53 and 3/4 concerning PEG access and cable-related funding.
Motion to approve?
Second.
There's a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, this does require just a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wait a minute, go ahead.
You're actually just voting to send it to advertising.
Oh, motion to send to advertising.
Second.
This will be back next 2 weeks. There's a motion to send this to advertising in a second. Any discussion, Mr. George? Oh, I thought you went like that. Don't go like that.
I'm done.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is going to advertising. And we have new business under item N. We have two orders tonight, FY 19-057, directing the town manager to create a special reserve fund sponsored by Councilor Fitzgibbons. Is there a motion to refer this to Budget and Finance
So
Committee?
moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
I'd just like to have a little discussion here at this point in time. When I was out at the polling place on election day, I ran into a longtime town resident who said this building was amazing, and it's something we need to preserve. And, specifically referring to the outside of the building, the siding, the roofing, et cetera, where sometimes we can't find the money or we let it sit there. We're really, really good at letting things sit there till there's a crisis and then running around like chickens with our heads cut off. And so this was a means to get in front of it. Now, I believe other people may have different ideas for these things, but just what I'm really trying to spark here amongst the council is a thought and discussion amongst us. How do we put money away, not just into one big rainy day fund, but that we know this is going to go to that purpose, and whether folks have an appetite for that or not. So that's kind of the genesis of it. And that's what I was hoping that the Budget and Finance committees working along with the town manager and the finance director could, hash out and bring back to us as, a reasonable suggestion.
Okay, all right, we're going to have a discussion about this? All right.
Actually,
All right, go ahead, Mr. Souza.
Mr. Souza.
Okay. We're working on just this building. Look around the other buildings in town. They could all use a little help. Going forward, if we only set it up for one, why aren't we doing it for all of them?
Mr. George?
Itemize them.
So I guess just a question for clarification to Mr. Fitzgibbons is, do you envision this as taking, just say, the money that we already have for capital expenditures and making subgroups dedicated to particular buildings or things like that?
I didn't view it as anything in particular, other than, one of the things, and I'll just go back to an example when I was on the Board of Assessors. One of the things that the Board of Assessors has to do every 3 years is the mandatory revaluation. And so rather than ask for all the money every 3 years in the budget, it's spread out in 1/3 amount increments, and it's put away. It's a 103. So it was put away and it's stored for that special purpose. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about is we might not have to do a whole bunch in 1 year, but ultimately 10 years down the road, we're going to need to do something and we need to have a source of funds. Whether it comes from a different reserve fund or from regular appropriations during the year, that's up to him and his finance team to figure out. But I think the person I spoke with anyway would feel a lot better about things if they knew that there was something there that could be gone to in X number of years when we need a roof, in Y number of years when we need new siding, new windows, etc. Not the everyday, day-to-day maintenance, but the stuff that, ultimately becomes that kind of capital expense that, as I said before, we're pretty good at kicking those things down the road. Look at the highway department vehicles. Okay, so that's kind of the concept behind it, and I just wanted to put it out there for discussion and to have the town manager, the finance director, the budget and finance committee look at it and come back, with certainly amendments to it to say we should add other buildings, we should do, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, thank you.
Very good.
You got Mr. Collins?
Go ahead.
I think this is a great idea. I mean, I was on the committee that worked on getting this building renovated, rebuilt, and I recall the architect saying that it's kind of a standard practice to allocate a certain percentage of the capital cost of the building to maintenance. I can't remember what the percentage is. It might have been as much as 2% or something. But that's kind of standard industry practice to say if the building costs X, you put X times, or whatever percent you should be spending that every year to maintain it. And one case in point is on the town hall. We essentially rebuilt that envelope, the exterior envelope that keeps the building tight to the weather, new windows, new roof, siding, everything. But if you look down at the base of the columns in the front, the capitals, there's where there are two big pieces of molding meet. There's a good 1/4-inch gap at the outside corner. And that's just a place for water to go. And so to not spend the money to pay a painter to fill those, to caulk those gaps is really foolhardy. It's you're throwing your money away. I can't remember what we spent on that building, but a stitch in time does save 9. So I think this is a really critical measure, and I guess it's, as Mr. Fitzgibbons said, it's really best probably left to a collaborative effort between the town manager and other people to figure out the best mechanism for doing it. But I think this is really important, so I fully support it.
So we'll send this to committee and we'll have more discussion later on. So Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So it's sent to Budget and Finance Committee. Order FY 20-010, the supplemental appropriation for FY 20. I'll refer to the town manager for a brief explanation on this.
Mr. President, as I mentioned earlier, we have been able to add to the monies that we are currently budgeting for the school assessment, the Bridgewater Rainham assessment. We fell short, as you well know. We've heard from the public, obviously, and internally we've heard from you and others. So we were able, as I mentioned, to take some of the additional new growth revenues that we are projecting. There was roughly an additional $200,000. We've allocated that according to our revenue sharing program. We have added roughly $230,000 to the Bridgewater Rainham assessment, which gets them just about there. We've also been able to add one position at the Highway Department, and importantly, very importantly to us, we've also been able to add funding to account for some of the additional expense that we will have to incur adhering to the new federal and state stormwater regulations. So that is there as a supplemental appropriation, and as I mentioned earlier, there's no 45-day time limit on that, so we don't have to take action on that by the 14th.
Motion to refer to the Budget and Finance Committees.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Wood?
If I can just point out, in addition to what the town manager pointed out, so one of the questions that came up during the discussion over a couple weeks was about whether or not the school budget had capital items in it. And so one of the ways that we're making room overall is through the use of this capital fund of the $135,000 plus change. And so that allows the school district to essentially pay for items that are in their operational budget through this additional funding that would have been capital funding anyway if they had requested it. So it gives a little more elbow room in the whole process, and I'm not sure that was clear in this, but it will go to Budget and Finance and then come back and we'll discuss it again. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Just ask the council clerk to schedule a hearing for that.
Do we need a hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Citizens' comments. We still have one citizen sitting very patiently here. If they wish to address the council, any citizen wishing to speak in citizens' comments? If not, I'll refer to the council for comments. I'll begin with Councilor Souza on my far right.
Just recently, I went up to the police station, not that I was getting arrested. Our long-term prosecutor, Chris, I can't remember his last name, that's like Shaw, retired, 24 years of service. I was there. I thanked him on behalf of the council and the townsfolk, and it's people like him who really helped this town grow and be safe. And I just wanted to mention that he did retire, only to go to another job. But that's okay, we all do that when we retire young.
Mr. Chase.
Thank you. I think I'd just like to comment very briefly on the town election just having transpired last week. I want to congratulate all of the candidates for every office, certainly amongst us here, Mr. Souza and Mr. Rushton, welcome to the council. But all the candidates who devoted quite a bit of time and activity toward their respective campaigns, and as well the town clerk's office and staff, the town clerk herself, all the volunteers who took part in the activity on Saturday, the vote tallying and whatnot, the high school students who volunteered to put in some hours at the polling place. There were definitely a lot of hands active to make that election day successful. It was expressed to me by a number of citizens over the final, I'll say, week or so of the campaign that they were actually a little surprised. They had not known that the town election was coming. On the one hand, I think to myself, well, it is an annual event each April. Of course, I realize, from our perspective, we're well aware of it many months ahead of time, but I don't know if there's anything that could possibly be reasonably done to further encourage voter participation and activity with respect to the annual town meeting, annual town election. I would certainly hope that in some form or another, active participation could be increased. That may be something well beyond our means, I don't know, but I certainly would welcome any suggestions now or at any other time as to what, if anything, we as a council might do just to promote more active voter participation. But it was a well-organized event, and congratulations to all who had a part in it.
Mr. Wood?
I will also say congratulations to everyone that won. I didn't see any debates on policy or anything like that. I thought the election was one of the best kept secrets in the region. The enterprise didn't cover anything. It was hard to find signs for the election place. I think in other towns that I drive through every single day, there were signs out of people running locally, whether it be moderator. Well, I can't imagine spending $700 to buy signs to be moderator, but there was clear evidence in those towns that there was going to be a vote. Some towns have signs that they put out that say, big signs that say "Town Vote Saturday," whatever. And so, to Mr. Chase's point, I think that next year we need to make a bigger effort, whether it's just lawn signs that say simply "Vote Saturday," or getting the highway department to put out the big signs about the vote. We got 900 people out. The expectation was actually lower. I thought that was good, but that's only a very, very small percentage of the voters. So a couple additional comments. So generally I make comments to maybe the public. In this case, this particular one is for the public. So regarding the term limits, a political science expert told me that one of the huge downsides to term limits is that in their last term, the representatives stop working for the people they represent because there's no more accountability. District councilors work with their neighborhood residents and businesses to ensure equal representation within the town. The representatives for districts 2, 5, and 6 are now in their last term. So for the sake of Bridgewater, I hope that the expert's wrong in this case and that we continue to work for the town and our particular neighborhoods that we represent. These comments are for the council here. The campaign was impressive. The town clerk stood before this group and said that she was going to campaign against the charter revision. The clerk handed out flyers. Those flyers made their way to be posted in businesses around town. Most government study committees have concluded that an appointed town clerk is best because it ensures that a skilled and qualified professional fills the position. Merrily agreed that whether appointed or elected, the duties of the town clerk remain the same. But too many people around Bridgewater believe that the clerk has check and balance power over the council and the manager. I've heard that multiple times over the past several years. I heard it during Sean's presentation, I heard it during my presentation, I heard it during committee meetings that the clerk has check and balance power over the council and the manager. The responsibilities of the town clerk do not overlap with the manager or the council. The clerk is not responsible for HR or running other departments or creating town policy. The town clerk should not be the go-to person inside the town hall for people to get things done or to stop things from being done. The job of the town clerk is to be the town clerk. The advice to this council, the council that replaces us, and the council that replaces them is to continue to reach out to the community to ensure that they know who you are and that they can talk to you. You are their representative. Someday here in Bridgewater, the town clerk will be appointed, not elected, and that will be a positive thing. Thank you.
Mr. George?
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome, Mr. Rushton. Welcome back, Mr. Chase, Mr. Souza. Appreciate everyone, either re-upping or stepping in for the first time. I'm very much appreciative of people, in what regards, elected, appointed, taking the time to try to make our community better. So thank you and welcome aboard. I also want to say thank you for electing me vice president. I don't exactly know what that means, but I guess I'll figure it out, Mr. President.
It's on Saturday.
There you go. I do want to remind people this Saturday is the reschedule of the town cleanup. I think the weather's going to be okay. But for those that did it last year, it was a great time. We got a lot of trash, but in comparison to what was out there, probably the next week, it was a little disheartening. But it's definitely worth the effort. It's good for the exposure. Plus, they have a real nice event at the Music Alley right afterwards. So, if you have the opportunity, please make the time to go. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Rushton.
Well, I'll keep my comments brief since they're my first, but I'd first say thank you to the town clerk and her staff for running the election, along with the lacrosse team up at the high school. Couldn't really get it done without volunteers, obviously. And some of the counselors that came and stood with me in the parking lot for that long, cold day in the parking lot. And certainly, all of the people who came out to vote, and I look forward to working with all of you. That's it.
Mr. Columbotus.
I just want to congratulate all the councilors who were elected, and particularly welcome Mr. Rushton to the council. I look forward to working with him, and that's it.
I'm just going to echo Mr. Columbotus. Welcome back, Mr. Chase, Mr. Souza. Welcome aboard, Mr. Rushton. Certainly glad to work with you all going forward on moving Bridgewater forward together. So that's it.
And I'll get the last word tonight. Again, I want to welcome back Mr. Souza, Mr. Chase to the council, and certainly welcome Matt to the board. I've known him for a long time, so he's not a new face to me, but I'm sure he'll be just fine on the council. As Councilor George said, if you can get out Saturday from 11 to 1, I believe it is, 11 to 1, to meet at the Common, there's Music Alley for the annual town cleanup. I know the grass is turning green and the leaves are starting to bud. Just got to pick up that trash and we'll be looking really good Monday morning. I want to thank the council for supporting my being president for the next year. I appreciate that. This should be a very busy and interesting year. There'll be a lot of things coming before us. We'll have great discussion and spirited debate on, and that's what's important. Also, just a reminder that next week we are going to meet. A week from tonight will be our next meeting, May 14th, 7:30 right here. It's a special council meeting specifically to talk about the FY budget. And also, you will be getting information from me or the town council clerk about committee assignments. So for those of you that are on committee, if those of you that have committees that are on committee assignments, if you want to change them or you want to stay where you are and pick what you want to do, just send them in, and hopefully by the end of this month we'll all have our assignments on our committees and get that done sooner than later. And finally, I want to welcome Leah Wyatt to the Budget and Finance, not the Budget and Finance, the Finance Committee to the town, and thank her for stepping up, and I hope that the other name that was mentioned earlier does as well, and we'll have a full Finance Committee, even though the budget's almost done. And on that note, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second. The motion is a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.